To the times of the Roman Empire, victorious Roman generals who had successfully conquered a whole people would get a huge parade in their name. There were celebrations over many days. During those days, he would be worshipped by the Roman people almost as a god. Because of this, a servant had to walk next to them every one of those days and whisper into their ear, Memento Mori, remember that you are mortal.
Now, over 2,000 years later, Stoicism has made a comeback and we find Memento Mori again, this time as a stoic contemplative practice that should help us gain perspective and perhaps mental clarity. On the Icario team, we decided to try if we could put this into practice. So for 7 days in a row, we spent some time every day contemplating our own mortality. And we wanted to find out whether this would be helpful in any way, whether it is a good contemplative practice, and whether it would translate into action. Perhaps this is the thing that will make the difference between living a good life and realizing at one point in our lives that we are close to death and we have wasted our time. On day one, we started off by simply having a discussion. We were simply talking to each other about our own mortality, and that was our entry point into the challenge.
Like, you're gonna die eventually, but dying before you're ready, you know what I mean? When you don't expect it, that's what is scary to me.
On days 2 and 3, we did contemplative exercises. Kind of like meditation, we would just sit there for a few minutes at a time and just in our minds confront ourselves with our own mortality. Just like in meditation, the trick is to keep your attention from drifting away and just bring it back to, I am going to die, this is real, this is really going to happen. And time. All right, so let's talk about what was the experience like?
So during the first exercise, I really tried to get close to the idea of myself dying, and I couldn't exactly connect with it. I felt inside that I'm not afraid of dying, but at the same time I felt like maybe that's denial, like it's bullshit. I'm bullshitting myself that I'm not afraid of death. So I wasn't sure what to do with this. It was like a little bit of uncertainty of if I'm being truthful or not.
I noticed the ways that my mind distracted me from the reality of it. So I'd sit there and contemplate it, and then my mind would just get distracted and think of other things, like what I'm going to eat later on that day or whatever. And it was just, it was like an avoidance strategy.
I don't think it had a big effect on me, but it had a subtle effect. It was very interesting to spend a meditation period just contemplating my own mortality. Nothing spectacular happened, but I feel like there was a subtle shift of something.
I was trying to imagine my death and I just wasn't feeling anything. Like, I was trying to imagine myself on my deathbed or something like this, and I just wasn't feeling it. It kind of felt like I was faking it, like I could tell that I was faking it. So I think that's what came up for me.
It was hard to really connect to an emotion.
On day 4, we wanted to make it a little more practical and a bit more real. And so once again, we were contemplating our own mortality, but we went to a cemetery to do so. Being in the graveyards, okay, you have, in a way, it's supposed to bring the experience of death closer, but almost everyone, you have all these old pictures of old people, right? Everyone died old. And that ironically made it like feel more distant rather than closer. So it's almost like just sitting there contemplating my death is more immediate than being here. It's like, oh, these old people I don't know died. So in that sense it kind of backfired. But then we found this one grave of someone who died young. This is someone who died not that long ago, at the age of like 21. And that makes it more real, I think. So it's almost like, again, maybe it's like your mind is trying to find comfort in the fact that, oh, these are all old people, I'm not that old. But then I'm glad that we found this, because it makes it real, the realization that, yeah, no, you could die young. This guy certainly didn't plan to die in his 20s. And I'm sure everyone around him felt like he had all this life ahead of him. So this is the realest one in a way, for me. On day 5, we did a longer writing exercise where in writing we answered 2 questions. If you knew for sure that you were going to die 10 days from now, what would you do in those 10 days? And the second question, if you knew for sure that you were going to die 10 years from now, what would you do in those 10 years?
With 10 days to live, the most important thing for me is to be with my family in nature. So I wanted to arrange as fast as possible to get everybody together and go to Namibia, which is just one of my favorite places where you are just far away from civilization and you get to just experience the night sky and the stars and the desert and the nothingness. And yeah, I just want to be there for 10 days.
Record a video of everything I'd learned that I haven't shared yet in my life that I just wanted to tell people. And those were 2 things that stand out. A lot of it had to do with spending time with my family and friends. So that was one of the main things that I said I would do. Like fly home, get a big house, have everybody there and do a big celebration.
Saying the things I've never had the courage to say. Forgiving the people in the past who I've had issues with or whatever. And thanking the people who've had an influence on my life in a positive way. It was all centered around other people.
So for me, the 10 years exercise was interesting, but nothing new, because I'd basically done something like this before, and I'd already decided that I wanted to live my life in such a way that basically I would be at peace with the idea of dying in 10 years. So it was a reminder of my values and the reminder of why I'm doing the things I'm doing.
I would stay on the path that I'm on, but the closer I would get to the 10 years mark of it coming to an end, the more risks I would take, the more rebellious I would probably get. And I'd love to be in some kind of philanthropy, humanitarianism towards the end of it, where I'd really take some big risks and make some big changes in the world, even if it meant me potentially dying. It wouldn't matter, I'm going to be dead anyway.
Teaching people how to help alleviate their suffering and live a better life. And so, which is kind of like what we're doing with Icario right now, but it was, if I had 10 years, I would just basically spend a lot of time with family and friends, having a lot of fun, and also building something that I can basically leave when I'm gone.
I know that I'd go and get a couple of dogs. I'm gonna do that soon. I'd get a tattoo. I'd be in a relationship rather than just dicking around with like loads of women. I'd use the things I've been through, and I'd think of the best possible thing I could do with what I've been through, and it'd be something to the effect of preventing men from killing themselves. Not like preventing them killing themselves as in right at the brink, although it might include that, but it's just men's mental health. Because I just realised that it fucking breaks my heart that men kill themselves more than anything else. Like men under 40, they kill themselves more than anything else kills them, which is just fucking nuts, So I figured within 10 years, like what could I do? I can't survive past 10 years, but maybe I can make it so that so many more people survive beyond 10 years than I do. So yeah, that kind of put that in perspective for me.
On day 6, we revisited what we wrote the day before, and we asked ourselves, how do we make this practical? How do we take this from pure contemplation into our real lives, and how will we change our actions and our behavior based on the insights we'd gained?
One thing was not wasting time, so not wasting so much time watching YouTube videos. I think the 10-year thing really forced me to be like, okay, I need to have a bit of a sense of urgency. If I didn't have all the time in the world, what would I do? And that kind of made me realize that I want to cut out a lot of the BS that I do during the day. Nobody's perfect, but just cutting out the YouTube and the wasted time during the day. There's a time and a place for that, but basically cutting out a lot of that stuff. Oh, and the second one was just basically relentlessly facing my fears. The thing that I realized is that if I had 10 years left to live, then there basically wouldn't be time for fear. I would just have to relentlessly execute on what I want, whether that be the relationship that I want, whether that be the business that I want. There'd be no time for fear. So I kind of realized that if I want to make those things happen now, then I can't tolerate fear now.
I did this because I really feel in tune with this gratitude so strongly when I contemplate my own death. And I wanted to tune into that feeling and express it instead of just keeping it for myself. And you're someone who comes to mind because I just feel super grateful that we met. It's just been such a cool adventure that we've had together, you know. I mean, I feel very lucky that we crossed paths.
I think first off, I'm going to inquire about how I become a therapist. I've already trained a few years as a therapist, but I never became certified. And also, in terms of getting dogs and getting my own apartment, maybe moving in with my girlfriend and stuff, this stuff requires money. And it's something I've always been pretty shit with. And it's something that it's about time I sorted that out.
On the 7th and final day of this challenge, we went back to a simple contemplation exercise. And we wanted to see if this contemplative exercise would feel different, if our experience of it would be different, because of all the experiences we'd had in the preceding days. This actually surprised me. There was a huge shift for me from the beginning to the end of the challenge. In the beginning, my attitude was much darker, and I was much more thinking about how life can be so hard and it can feel like a burden, and it's almost like the promise of death at some point, that there's something almost relieving about that. It's almost a relief. By the end of this challenge, it was just all gratitude. It just really brought me in tune with the present moment and with gratitude. So for me, this is a really surprisingly much more effective challenge than I thought it would be.
Maybe even more valuable than the conclusions or the things that I should be doing were the conversations, like the things we talked about, and it advanced my ideas about what all of it is really about. And I feel I'm not at the end of this, but it was worth investigating and starting or continuing the investigation.
The change for me was that I understood that I was being truthful with myself when I said I'm not entirely afraid to die. I mean, of course, everybody I think is afraid to die, but I'm comfortable with the idea. But through doing these exercises, I came to realize that I'm not bullshitting myself. I have things that I need to do, but I'm okay with this, and these exercises helped me see that that's true.
I think the thing that changed the most is that if I want to tap into the fact that I'm gonna die, I can. Like if I want to be aware of the fact that, like, okay, switch on, now imagine you have 10 years left. Okay. It made me realize like the fragility of life basically, and that like these things we take for granted are going to end. These days that we have are going to end. And I can now tap into that, whether I want to or not. So I think that's what changed, yeah.
It's like the actual reality of death is a lot closer. It's not just this thing that's in the future, like, oh, when I'm 90, I'm just going to die peacefully in my sleep. It's like, no, probably not. Who knows, right? So it's a lot closer. It's actually uncomfortably close. Like it plays on my mind every day in a sense. I'm just thinking, yeah, this is still going to end, and I don't know what's going to come next. So, you know, it's powerful. It's real. You know, so contemplate your death, realize the reality of it, or stay ignorant to it. You know, I don't blame anyone for what decision they make in that way.